Welcome to the Price Academy, bite-sized history videos. This video is introducing Mary Boleyn, the mistress of Henry VIII. Mary Boleyn was the elder daughter of Thomas Boleyn and Elizabeth Howard and was born in around 1502 at Bickling Hall in Norfolk. She was named after Princess Mary Tudor, the youngest child of Henry VIII and Elizabeth of York. Mary was the eldest of three siblings, a brother George, who was born around 1503, and Anne, born around 1507. Mary grew up at Hever Castle in Kent and was considered to be the prettier of the two Boleyn sisters. She was reported to have fair hair and blue eyes. As a child, Mary was taught French and also studied music. In 1513, Mary was sent to the court of Brussels to serve as maid of honour to Margaret, Archduchess of Austria and Regent of the Netherlands. The Archduchess was reportedly delighted with Mary. She later joined the entourage of the Princess Mary, sister of Henry VIII, when Princess Mary journeyed to France to become the wife of the King of France. Mary acquired an unsavoury reputation at the French court. She was eventually to become the mistress of the French King Francis I. Francis ungallantly named her his English mare and later referred to her as a great whore, the most infamous of all. Following her return to England, Mary was appointed as lady-in-waiting to Henry VIII's Queen, Catherine of Aragon. She married William Carey on the 4th of February 1520 in the Chapel Royal at Greenwich. Carey was 24 years old. Henry VIII attended the wedding and gave them a gift of 6 shillings and 8d. Carey was not a titled lord, but was a gentleman of the Royal Privy Chamber. As William's wife, she had lodgings at court. Mary later caught the eye of King Henry VIII, who in turn made her his mistress in 1522. Mary had 2 children to William Carey, Catherine, born around 1524, and Henry, born around March 1526. The question remains if the children were Henry VIII's, as it coincides with the time of their affair. William's acceptance of his wife's affair with the king resulted in him being rewarded with 2 keeperships, a stewardship, an annuity, and manors and estates in 2 counties. The affair ended by midsummer of 1525, by which time the king's attention had passed to her younger sister, Anne. Tragedy struck when William Carey died of a sweating sickness on the 23rd of June 1528. Mary was left a widow without any means to support herself. Wardship of the 2-year-old Henry Carey was granted to his aunt Queen Anne by Henry VIII. The Queen later oversaw his upbringing. Henry was raised at a religious house in preference to court, and Mary saw him very little. Mary took her daughter, Catherine Carey, and returned to Hever Castle. This was a difficult time for Mary, but Henry VIII stepped in and granted her an annuity of £100 a year. In November 1530, Henry gave Anne £20 to redeem a jewel for Mary. It was probably a gambling debt. 2 years later, in 1532, Mary was one of 30 ladies who accompanied Henry and Anne on a visit to France during the Field of the Cloth of Gold. They stayed in Calais in late October, attending various events with Francis I. Henry wanted to present Anne to the foreign king. When Henry wed Anne in 1533, Mary became a lady-in-waiting to her sister. It was only in 1534 that she and Anne had a serious conflict. In 1534, Mary secretly married William Stafford. This marriage was a disaster for her, although she loved Stafford, a soldier she had met at Calais, who had been part of Henry VIII's retinue. However, her relatives were outraged. He was a commoner, not fit for the Queen's sister. Mary and her new husband were banished from court. Her son was still living with his aunt Queen Anne and being tutored by the great French poet Nicholas Bourbon. When Anne fell into disfavour and was charged with adultery and incest, Mary did not visit her when she was imprisoned in the Tower, nor did she visit their brother George, also condemned to death. Mary lived to see her children gain some royal favour. Her teenage daughter, Catherine, was appointed lady-in-waiting to Anne of Cleves, and in 1540 married Sir Francis Knollys, a popular member of Henry's household. Henry Carey became Lord Hunsdon under Elizabeth's reign. Mary seems to have been living in Rochford, Essex, at the time of her death on the 19th of July, 1543. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, to like and subscribe to the channel or follow me on Twitter or at Facebook at TanyaAlex38.